Are wall to wall on radio and television of current affairs programmes, but this is the one where you, the public, here in LBC, get your chance to have your say. And I'm going to be really interested this morning. In the first hour, we're going to talk about Trump. Trump at Davos, Trump with the Piers Morgan interview, Trump's comments on Brexit and the Prime Minister. And from 11, we will talk about the Conservative Party and whether it is doomed if it stays on its current course. And regular listeners to this show will know I have now been saying for 6 months that she's watering Brexit down to such an extent that she will begin to split her own party and lose her own vote. But this week was really interesting. Davos, the World Economic Forum, not something that American presidents regularly attend. Indeed, it's 20 years ago since Bill Clinton went to Davos. And of all the people to go, Donald Trump. And, you know, you'd have thought, wouldn't you, that it was rather like Daniel going into the lion's den, because all of these big businesses have been really fiercely critical of him. Many of the other world leaders, particularly those in the European Union, were very suspicious of him. But Trump arrived at Davos, and frankly, it was like sort of Michael Jackson in his heyday arriving. People queuing for an hour to get in to listen to him. Here's just a flavour of Trump at Davos.
I'm here today to represent the interests of the American people and to affirm America's friendship and partnership in building a better world. I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again. We support free trade, but it needs to be fair and it needs to be reciprocal, because in the end, unfair trade undermines us all.
So America is booming, America is open for business, and, you know, this is what Trump does. He talks in a hugely upbeat way about his own country. Now, whilst he was over there, Piers Morgan managed to get, for Good Morning Britain, managed to get the first overseas interview that Trump has done for a year. Now, this is going to be played at 10 p.m. tonight on ITV, but we have got a few clips of it. And one of the big questions that Piers Morgan asked him was about, do you remember the retweet of the Britain First stuff? Let's hear what the president had to say.
I don't want to cause any difficulty for your country, that I can tell you.
And, can I get an apology out of you just for the retweets of Britain
Well, if you're
First?
telling me...
I think it would go a long way.
Then here's what's fair. If you're telling me there's a horrible people, horrible racist people, horrible, I would certainly apologize if you'd like me to do that. I know nothing about them.
And you would disavow yourself of people like that?
I don't want to be involved with people, but you're telling me about these people because I know nothing about these people.
And that, you know, I'm not in the least bit surprised that Trump said that. The way that it worked, actually, is that Trump now has over 47 million Twitter followers, but only follows back 45 people, one of whom is a US conservative commentator called Alan Coulter. It was she that retweeted the Britain First stuff, and he retweeted her. He also, Piers asked her about his relationship with the British Prime Minister, Theresa May.
You have a very good relationship with your Prime Minister, who I just left, and she's been doing I think she's been doing a very good job. We actually have a very good relationship, although a lot of people think we don't. I support her. I support a lot of what she does and a lot of what she says, and I support you militarily very much. I mean, we will come to your defense if anything should happen, which hopefully will never happen. But I am a tremendous supporter of the UK.
My irritation with my country, we've given state visits to Bashar al-Assad, to Robert Mugabe, to Vladimir Putin, and to President Xi. So the implication from them trying to ban you is that somehow you're worse than they are.
Well, I hadn't heard about banning, but I think a lot of the people in your country like what I stand for. They respect what I stand for.
And to those who don't,
I do stand for tough borders.
I'm going to come to that now, but to those who don't, what do you say to them?
I don't care. I don't care. It's just one of those things. I don't say anything. You know why? Because I don't care.
Well, that's very Trumpian, isn't it? If you don't like me, I don't care. Actually, I tell you what, for politicians, that's quite a useful thing. Because if political figures worry too much about what the opposition think of them, they finish up not saying or doing anything. So he's being very nice about the UK. He'll defend us, whatever the cost. He wants to have a trade deal with us. He does want to come and visit at some point in time. But here is the sting in the tail, the impact of which I think may be quite significant upon Theresa May, because he was asked about how he thought the Brexit negotiations were going?
Would it be the way I negotiate? No, I wouldn't negotiate it the way it's negotiated, but I have a lot of respect for your Prime Minister, and I think they're doing a job. I think I would have negotiated it differently. I would have had a different attitude.
What would you have done?
I think I would have said that the European Union is not cracked up to what it's supposed to be, and I would have taken a tougher stand in getting out.
Are we front of the queue, or are we behind the French? Because we're a bit worried about Emmanuel Macron, who's been all over you, trying to be your new best friend.
No, I like him. He's a friend of mine, Emmanuel. He's a great guy. His wife is fantastic. I like him a lot.
Well, there was Trump. Trump perhaps proving the point that you can get on with people with different points of view. Now, look, cards on the table. You know, I thought Trump was a very necessary thing. I supported Trump. I spoke on the platform in Mississippi with Trump. I went back for the debates he did against Hillary. I was there in the spin room. I thought Trump was a very necessary part of change that was needed. I thought he'd be good for America. I thought he'd be good for Britain. And I thought he'd be good in the battle that I've been engaged in for over 20 years, namely fighting the big unelected bureaucracies and putting the concept of nation-state back where I think it needs to be. Is he a bit rough and ready at times? Yes. Can he sometimes be his own worst enemy by picking endless fights? Yes. But I feel I was right to do those things back then, and to stand on the platform with him. And I noticed after his speech at Davos, Lloyd Blankfein, the boss of Goldman Sachs, I mean, Goldman Sachs and Trump poles apart. Blankfein saying, do you know what? Actually, there was a lot more in this speech I liked than I didn't like. Sir Martin Sorrell, the boss of WPP, biggest advertising agency in the world. And Sorrell, very much against Brexit, very much against Trump, saw him interviewed, saying that actually, you know, this was a president that understood business, and he speculated that maybe in the midterm elections in November, Trump might do better than people thought. So in the world of business, there's definitely a shift of people saying, hey, do you know what? He's not as bad as we feared he would be. Amongst politicians, what I think by the time this Piers Morgan interview has been played tonight, I think the European Union and the bosses are going to need the smelling salts, because he clearly is vehemently opposed to unelected bureaucracies having this level of power. But what about you folks? Because I probably took more stick for standing up for Trump than I ever did for daring to take on the European Union, even more stick than I took for daring to talk back in 2004 about open-door immigration. So I'm asking you, in the light of what you've seen, his behaviour, his style at Davos, the snippets we've seen already of the Piers Morgan interview, the things he's saying about the United Kingdom and our future relationship, I'm asking you whether you have changed your mind, whether I'm no longer alone in thinking he's more a force for good than bad. So you can call me. You know, if you think he's better than you thought, please call me on 0345 6060 973. If you still loathe him, whatever he says or does, well, you can text to 84850, although within reason. I mean, don't be too rude, please. And if you think perhaps he's right about May being weak on the European Union, then tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I'm a fan of the straight-talking man that is the Donald. Nope, he ain't perfect, but who is, says Eileen, and she does that via text. My first caller is Joe, who's calling from Nantwich. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you? You well?
I'm well when we talk about Trump and what's happening in America. I'm less well when we talk about May and Brexit, but we'll do that after 11 o'clock. So, Joe, 1 year on, is he doing better than you thought he would?
Well, I was very fortunate in 1986 to actually meet Donald Trump when I was in New York. My father was very friendly with a chap called Henry Bennett, who he actually was a construction for Trump Towers. So I was very fortunate to meet him long before he became the Trump of today. As you said, when he walks into a room, you go, wow. And I shook his hand. I didn't say much to him, but I was very fortunate to meet him. I listen to everything he says, and it's the first time I've ever heard an American leader, which I find quite amazing, state to the world that, if England was ever in difficulty, was ever attacked, was ever in need of assistance or help, that America would put its arm around our country and he would protect us. I mean, to me, this man, yes, he's very straight-talking, and perhaps politicians don't like the way he talks, but he is a friend of ours, and we need friends. The United Kingdom needs friends, and we should really be holding our arms outstretched to this man. Yeah, he's mentioned. I think his biggest problem, he tweets, and maybe he shouldn't tweet as much as he does. But it's just endemic of what he does.
Well, the tweets, Joe, get him into trouble. Joe, the tweets get him into trouble, but equally, the tweets probably won him the presidency.
Yeah, probably it did, but that's his only fault, and we all have our faults. But he is our friend, and I think I have never changed my opinion of him right from the word go. I've always thought that he would be good for England, the United Kingdom. I still think he'll be good for the United Kingdom. Well, we need to bring him into us, not push him away.
Joe, brilliant, thank you. And Joe, who met the Donald way back in 1986, and makes the point: when did you ever hear a US president as openly and as explicitly say, "We are here to help you and defend you if it's ever necessary"? And I never, ever, ever would betray any words of private conversation that I've had with Trump, but I can tell you in general terms, he loves this country. His mother came from the Scottish Western Isles. He's got a huge affection for the United Kingdom, for the Queen, and he kind of regards himself, yes, he's American, but he's very deeply aware of his British and Scottish roots. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. And it's 10:15. Is the Donald a better president than you thought he might be? Tony says, we need a Trump here. May is useless. We'll come to that at the top of the hour. Nigel, most people who've been opposed to Trump and Brexit are now going to be too scared of coming on your show to admit they were wrong or might have been wrong. You were right on two fronts, Nigel, but how many people, even at LBC, will admit that? Says Gary from Epsom. Well, I'm sure one or two LBC presenters wouldn't ever want to admit that. But the Donald, he's controversial. He gets involved in fight after fight after fight. He's the best thing, by the way, that's ever happened to the media, and particularly the New York Times and CNN, who he attacks relentlessly as being fake news. And you know what? Their subscriptions keep going up. Claire is calling from Edgware. Good morning, Claire.
Yes, good morning. I think the American legal system is what is going to protect us from Donald Trump, because the 300% tariff on Bombay goods had his full backing, and thank goodness the courts chucked it out, threw it out and put it down. But all Trump does is when he's abroad, he's stuck to the script. He's very good at reading auto cues. But we know his history. When he was building properties in New York, he was prosecuted for racism in the distribution of his apartments because he refused to rent his apartments to African Americans and anybody who wasn't white, Anglo-Saxon, basically British descendant. So therefore the man is not going to change his spots. He's our friend today because he was in Davos. When he gets back to America, he'll revert to kind, and he's about perpetuating himself. The massive tax cuts, although they'll take a long time to feed through, they're only going to benefit the top 1% because, as we all know, if we've got friends in America, most people earn about $20,000 or $30,000 a year, and you need to earn at least $75,000 to benefit. And this thing that they're going to repatriate all these millions and millions, even if they do, who says it's going to be distributed to the people? It's just going to be used as cash reserves.
Well, Claire, on the charge of racism, overnight he's announced that in fact he's going to make a very big concession to a number of illegal immigrants in America, the so-called Dreamers. And I think that's interesting. But also, Claire, let me come back at you with this point. One of the things that Trump said at Davos was how proud he was that the number of black and Hispanic Americans that were now in work was at an all-time record. And he genuinely feels, in the first year, he's done more for poverty in the black community than Obama did in 8 years.
The benefits that are coming through for the black community in America now, and as a black person now, I've got a lot of friends over there, were put in train when Obama was in. For him taking the credit, who's been in for a couple of months, is ridiculous. Many of the benefits, and also there were more jobs created in Obama's era anyway, if you actually check him out. But he's taken an awful lot of credit for what Obama did. He wanted to get rid of the Affordable Health Care Act, which would have affected mainly black people. And although what he's done is he's taken away the demand that small companies provided, and he's taken away the demand that everybody has it. So eventually, an awful lot of people are going to slip out. But he wasn't able to abolish it. So the impact. He says he's created more jobs for African American people. There might be more black people working at McDonald's. Yeah, there might be more black people working at Walmart's. I don't know. But he's taken an awful lot of credit for what he didn't actually do. But people are being fooled. All Donald Trump was able to do...
Claire, the US stock market has risen 30% since he was elected. Don't you think he's got something to do with that?
Yeah, well, the tax cuts. You know, if you slash corporation tax, the big businesses, of course, are going to benefit, and that's going to improve the stock market. But if you read up on people who've written about it, they say in a few years' time, America's going to take the hit for that because of the tax takes they're going to lose. Because unfortunately, and apparently, George W. Bush did the same thing when he started, and then America's deficit went up a couple of years later because the money was not repatriated in the droves.
Well, I tell you what,
it would be.
Claire, I will absolutely put my neck on the line. There will be the repatriation of hundreds of billions of dollars, and that is going to happen. But Claire, the other point, and you make this point that he's one thing here and he's a different thing when he goes back to America, and you imply that he's only our friend for the day. I don't know. I mean, the one thing that Piers Morgan, who has got this interview tonight, and very well done him, but Piers Morgan does not have the same politics as Donald Trump. Absolutely not. Piers has traditionally been Labour supporting in this country. But Piers says the one thing about Trump is if he's a friend of yours, he's utterly loyal. And, Claire, he did say to me, I will be your friend for life. Now, if you're right, he will drop me very, very quickly. We'll wait and see. Claire, thank you for your call. Thank you very much indeed for your points. Kevin is calling from Uxbridge and a first-time caller to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Good morning.
Morning, Nigel. Great fan of yours, by the way. I wish there was more politicians in this country like yourself, not frightened to put their head above the parapet.
I've done a bit of that over the years.
Yeah, and when I get back to Trump, I'm a fan of his. Whilst I might not agree with everything the man says or does, he's a not career politician. I'm going to keep this brief. I know you want to get people on. He's not a career politician. He's doing it. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Sometimes he doesn't think as clearly as he could, but he's a human being. But what I think, he's got the interest of the country at heart. He's not looking to further his career or heighten his financial bank balance. And like yourself, Nigel, he puts his head above the parapet all the time, gets it blown off, and head back on, and faces and marches on. This country lacks people like that in politics. They're all career politicians in this country, which is why we're in the state. Nigel, set up a new party and get out there and take us out of this mess that this country's in.
Well, Kevin, we're going to discuss all that after 11 o'clock, I promise you. But it's difficult, of course, Kevin, to discuss Trump and not at the same time, compare him, I guess, in many ways, to Theresa May. When you just heard those clips of him saying that if he'd been in charge of the Brexit negotiations, he'd have handled it very differently. Do people like you, Kevin, rather wish he was our leader and not Mrs. May?
I wish we had a strong leader. Again, I don't care what party it is. Bring back Thatcher, even, for God's sake. Someone that's, again, got backbone and spirit to take this country to where it should be.
And Blair had backbone and spirit too, whether people like him or not now, post the Iraq War, but at least with Blair as leader, he did give us some idea of where we were actually going. Kevin, I thank you.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Kevin, I thank you very much, and thank you for calling the show. If Trump was British, we'd have a leader who wanted the best for his country, if only. So there's somebody anonymously there, via Twitter, backing up those previous comments. Jonathan is calling from Finchley, another first-time caller. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Nigel. I'm absolutely, literally just super curious about how people can brush aside the aspects of Donald Trump and the way he's talked, the way he carries himself, and the way he represents the United States, and give him words of support. I just don't get it. When week after week, day after day, we read what he says and hear how he carries himself. It's just amazing. Regardless of the economy, and even if he's good for America or good for the world, whatever, just the way he expresses himself, it's nothing short of disgusting. Well, that's the only way I can think of it.
Jonathan, a lot of people agree with that. But when he's gone abroad, when he's been, and you've seen it over the last year, he went to Riyadh, he's been, of course, to Paris, he's been to Beijing. I mean, when he's out there, on the world stage, would you not agree that he's actually surprised people how well he's carried himself?
I actually I go further than that. There's a guy called Scott Adams, a Gilbert guy, and if you've heard any of his, he does vlogging, and I watched his vlog, and he explains how effective Donald Trump is, and he's been very effective in the sense that he's built up an empire with Trump Tower all over the world, etc. So he's obviously got some skills, and they can be put to good use for the United States and for the rest of the world. I'm not saying he doesn't have skills. I'm just saying, for me, those skills are completely overwhelmed by the fact that he doesn't tell the truth, that he insults people, that he calls people names, he bullies people, and to have that so in your face all the time, it is, to me, for people not to see that and be affected by that and say, well, it's all very nice, all the good potential he has, but I'm sorry, yes, to have the world's greatest nation, the most important job in the world, be represented by this reprehensible behaviour. I don't understand how people can't at least acknowledge it's a problem.
Do you think, Jonathan, that he's vulgar and coarse?
It's not. I wouldn't label him as vulgar, of course. I would just say that his behaviour, the kind of things he says and does, show a distinct lack of sensitivity, of understanding. It's bullying, lots and lots of lying. This whole fake news thing where he disses really decent journalists who are doing a really fantastic job, so important for a free society, and he disses them as fake news. Well, it's terrible.
Jonathan, do you not think that given the way the Democrats have declined in the United States of America, and it was John Sopel who made this point, which is from the BBC. Sopel made the point that the Democrats are in such a mess that effectively CNN and the New York Times are no longer objective reporters of news, they're now the opposition.
Well, I mean, I don't watch that much CNN here in the UK, but no. But I will say that because he courts publicity so much, deliberately or not, it's very difficult not to be shocked and to be. I read a tweet recently from the White House it's an email. I'm on the Donald Trump email thing, saying that 95% of the news are anti-Trump or whatever. Well, he brings that on himself and he complains about it.
Well, Jonathan, he may well do. Jonathan, your points about his style and what he says, you find him unacceptable. You're not on your own with that. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. It's 10:30. Now, I fully accept that I've been in a minority in this country of saying that I thought Trump would be good for America and good for us. Indeed, last year, YouGov poll showed that only 1 in 3 Brits would accept an offer to meet Donald Trump at the White House, which seems to me to be absolutely extraordinary. And still, according to a Sunday Express poll today, still 56% of people think that Trump shouldn't be given a state visit. So, I'm coming at this from a minority position, but I am asking you whether your views perhaps have changed a little bit, seeing what he said at Davos and the clips already that we've seen from the big Piers Morgan interview coming out tonight. And before the break, we were talking about his battle with CNN, the New York Times and many others. Lorraine says the way Trump is reported by the biased media is disgusting. That's the other point of view. Stuart says, can you trust any news outlet these days? Much better get it from the horse's mouth. And that, Stuart, is exactly why he uses Twitter. He uses Twitter to go round the back of the mainstream media that he so openly despises. And, of course, it is reciprocated too. Trevor is calling from Ulster in Cumbria, another first-time caller to the show. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Nigel. It's a pleasure.
Good morning. Well, thank you very much for giving us a call. So how do you see Trump? Has your view of him softened a little bit?
I'd like to clone him and bring him over here.
Now, if you were to clone a New Yorker, and even by the standards of Americans, who can be pretty straight and pretty blunt, New Yorkers are in a whole different league. His style, Trevor, wouldn't work in this country, would it?
I don't know. It worked with me. I mean, I'd like that last gentleman to listen to his speech to the farmers in America. It was phenomenal. People. I don't think the people who don't like Trump actually listen to him, because if they did, they couldn't say what they say. They couldn't. It's impossible.
Well, what they see, Trevor, what they see, Trevor, are some comments that he makes that at times they consider to be vulgar, they consider to be offensive, they don't think he behaves with the diplomatic skills that a US president should. That's what they'd say, Trevor.
Anyone with a brain, Nigel, knows that any man, if every man in this country was held to account for what he said in a bar somewhere, then none of us
we'd all be in quite a lot of trouble. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no,
I mean, yeah, go on.
No, I accept that point, Trevor. But where I will agree with you is that the whole point about this historic Brexit vote was that there was a fork in the road that the British people decided to take. And I think what Trump is saying is that if he was our leader, he'd have said, right, OK, do you know what? We've made a decision, let's just get on with it. And May is simply not doing that. So I do think, in terms of his decisiveness, right now, that's pretty much exactly what the country needs. I still say, Trevor, I don't think Donald Trump would quite work in number 10 Downing Street.
Well, maybe not, but I'll tell you what would work, Nigel, is you and a bunch of people like Rees-Mogg and a few others get together and bail us out of this, because otherwise we're going to end up in Europe. And I voted to get out, totally out. I didn't think of any. All I wanted was to have our power back, have our borders closed, and then when we're out, then we start to negotiate. You don't negotiate with somebody before you leave. That's crazy.
Trevor, thank you for your call. More of that after 11 o'clock. When Trump visits, 300,000 snowflakes will protest on the streets. The other 50 million of us won't. The Donald is welcome, says Mark in Bournemouth. Well, Mark, the idea that we give state visits to Mugabe, to Hirohito, to al-Assad, to all sorts of leaders all over the world with questionable at best human rights records, and yet it appears to be the official position of the Labour Party that we should not have Trump come to the country and protest on the streets, is not only of itself extraordinary, but utterly self-defeating, when here is somebody who says, in our hour of need, he will be there, and he wants a closer trade relationship. I find it incomprehensible, Mark. But there we are. At the moment, we're still, according to this poll this morning, we're still in a minority, although not an overwhelming one. It's becoming more like 50-50, and I feel that there is a slight softening of views when it comes to Trump, that he's actually been a little bit better, or not quite as bad as people thought he might have been as president. Steve is calling from Berkhamsted. Good morning, Steve.
Hi there, Nigel. Hi.
Good morning.
Your researcher asked me the question: do I like Donald Trump more now than I did 18 months ago? And the answer is, I adore the man more now than I ever did.
Adore him.
I love him. I absolutely love him. I do. And the thing is, I've been watching Donald Trump, on telly for the last 30, 40 years, just like all of us. And I've always back of my head, I've always sort of thought, is something going to happen with this guy? He's going to be something. And I'm not lying. About 18 months, 2 years ago, he ran for president. He paid for it all himself. The establishment in America don't like him because he knows the truth about the Twin Towers. He knows about JFK. He knows about all the fiddles and everything they've done. They just don't like it. It's the same with our movement in this country. I'm a Brexiteer like yourself, and I've been speaking about it for 35, 40 years. I mean, my dad used to tell me off about it when I was in my early 20s. I'm not joking. Before you, Nigel. And seriously, and I've campaigned. I mean, I drove my canal boat. I live on a canal boat. I drove my canal boat for 6 weeks in the campaign 18 months ago with massive great vote lead stickers.
Did you really?
Yes. All over the Midlands, all over the southeast London and everything, and all the rest of it. And you could tell as you was driving the boat closer towards London, that more and more people were putting their nose up. But the problem is the media is run by the establishment. I don't need to tell you this. The media's run by the establishment. We've got people like Tony Blair trying to sabotage, what we're trying to do.
You certainly have.
And you know all that. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, well, Steve, I don't know anything about Trump's views on the JFK assassination or the Twin Towers. But what I do know is that he's taken on the establishment in a most remarkable way. He's been underestimated at every single stage of this. And I was told, Steve, at the late September 2015, a friend of mine said he'd been and watched Trump speak. He said, you watch this, it's unbelievable. And at that stage, even I thought, you sure? Are you really, really sure? And no one thought he could win those primaries. No one thought he'd get the nomination. No one thought he could win the presidency. And he's surprised people all the way through. And Steve, you've been with him from the start, but I think he's going to go on surprising people. Steve, I thank you very much for your call. Love to have seen that canal boat during the 6 weeks of the referendum campaign. Robert is calling from Ripley. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thanks. So, how did Trump perform in Davos?
Okay, I think that there are a few points here. In Davos, I think we need to really just sit down, and it's like having the sort of drunk uncle come to a wedding and everyone holds their breath, hoping he doesn't do anything silly. And now we are hailing someone when he's coherent, which is not what the leader of the free world needs to be praised for. The fact that he can hold a few sentences together is not enough. So I'm not impressed by the fact that...
Robert, that line is dreadful, and what we're going to do, given that you've clearly got some very, very strong views on Donald Trump indeed, we're going to get you back in a moment. Trump's not perfect, but he's right about Brexit. A tougher negotiating stance is needed, says Helen. My views of Trump are the same as they were when he got elected. Trump is a true hero. He's making America great again. Well, it's very interesting. There are lots of you who are worried about Trump and his style. Those of you that like Trump seem to absolutely love Trump. It's fascinating. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:45. There's no doubt he is the most controversial politician that's ever been elected to lead a Western world country, and he just happens to lead the biggest, richest and most powerful of them. Yes, it's Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States of America. And, you know, he got a really, really bad press in this country in the run-up to that election, and it may well be that he deserved it. But I'm asking you, a year and a bit in, given his speech in Davos, given what we've seen of the interview that'll be played at 10 p.m. tonight on ITV with Piers Morgan, given what he said about wanting to come to the aid of this country if ever we have our hour of need and wanting good trade relations, I'm simply asking you, have your views of Trump changed? I'm going to go to James in Penner and ask that very question. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, I would say yes, my views have definitely changed. I mean, in my family, I've got a number of English teachers, accountants, doctors. Trump's style of communication is so without finesse. It's incredible. His use of English is you know, it's probably around about a 9-year-old, I would think. And he just, there is such a contrast between him and his predecessor that you can't help but have your senses sort of assaulted by the way that he communicates. But the reality is that when you peel that back and you say, well, what is the guy actually talking about? We all align with some of his key messages. I mean, he's really going on about globalisation in the main, whether you want to call it borders, when you want to call it trade. He's actually talking Keynesian economics, which actually is more socialist than
it's certainly that element of it's more left of centre, James. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what our view, and I've seen this amongst other people now that have been close to me. You know, initially people were absolutely outraged at his approach to things. They just saw him as an outright racist. And a bigot and all those things that you hear so often. But now people are starting to see what he's doing, and people are now starting to see and understand it. Because I think in this country there's this thing they call it a post-truth era, don't they? And really, that's what the press like to call it. The reality is that the voting public now, they don't vote based on what they hear through the media. They vote on what they see in their schools, what they see in their neighbourhoods, what they see in the streets, and on
social media too.
That's true, but I think people have always got there is a level of suspicion around social media. We know there's stuff out there that you'd say, well, that doesn't really stack. But the reality, people are not voting based on what they're reading in the mainstream media. They're voting on their personal experiences, and there's nothing that mainstream media is going to do that's going to change that. And that is exactly the same in America. You know, they talk about the Rust Belt. It's people's experiences, and they can listen to the likes of Hillary Clinton and stuff like that, and they're going, doesn't work for me. My street is falling apart. You know, all the shops are gone. You know, I don't recognise the culture of half the people that are living around me. It's, you know, people feel like they're living in a foreign land.
Do you know, James, when I went to Mississippi and I shared that platform with Trump, afterwards I went into the crowd to talk to people, to hear what they had to say, and it was just like meeting a crowd of people in the Midlands or the north of England who were intending to vote Brexit. They were exactly the same people with exactly the same kind of frustrations. James, finally, can I just ask you, if he carries on the current course, will he, in your opinion, win a second term?
Difficult. I would say yes. On balance, yes.
On balance, yes.
Depends if they put who they put up against them.
Oh, well, it'll probably be Hillary Clinton again, of course, because she's determined. She's determined to be the first female president of the USA. And I tell you what, whatever baggage Trump may have, she's got even more, and certainly her husband does. James, I thank you very much indeed for your thought and your call. And James there, saying actually that Trump can be a bit of a shock when you first confront him, but he isn't doing too badly. Jason in Watford. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, what do you think of the Donald 1 year on?
My opinion hasn't changed. It's always been the same.
Yep.
The question I need to ask you is why are we judging him when he's only been doing this job for a year?
Well, because it's a very good moment at which to judge him, isn't it, really? He's been there a year, he's been to Davos, he's done his first overseas interview with Piers Morgan, which goes out tonight at 10 o'clock on ITV. I'd have thought now was a great time to be judging how he's doing.
I think now's a ridiculous time, because there's nowhere near enough time to actually put into words or put into action the words that he's actually talking about. So, there's no wall being built yet. There's loads of different factors to the job that he's doing, and you can't just judge him like when he hasn't had the chance to actually do what he says he plans on doing.
Well, Jason, I would... OK, let me just throw this back at you very quickly. He's made some big changes through appointments in the American judicial system. He has deregulated thousands of laws in America that have been scrapped, and he's managed an absolutely historic reform of corporate tax. How would you judge him on those things?
Well, I'll judge him when we see the benefit of what he's done. So you can do lots of different things that will sometimes be very successful and sometimes won't. But within his first year, you can't judge him on how successful that these changes are going to actually be.
Okay.
My concern is that he does an awful lot of talking, and we keep going on about, and I've heard him say it, I've heard you say it, about how well the American stock market's doing. So that obviously reflects on how wonderful Donald Trump's doing. But we keep sort of putting down Theresa May, and yet our stock market's probably better now than ever.
Well, I think the big difference, of course, is that our stock market is full of companies, most of which are outside the United Kingdom. They're Chilean copper mines and various other things. So I think, to be honest with you, the FTSE is now more of a global stock index than it is a UK index. We need to look to the all-share 250, whatever, to get a better measure. Jason, OK, fine, you've made the point that he needs to do more to prove himself, and time will tell. What about in terms of perception? Because he was seen as the devil by many people.
But I think that's still the case by many people. And I think I have never seen him as the devil, and I just think he's a very, very clever man. And I think he's a marketing genius. So often he'll say things he doesn't really believe. Often people think, he's a racist. Of course the man's not a racist. You know he's not a racist. I know he's not a racist. But sometimes he'll make ignorant comments because he knows there's certain people that will back him for saying that. But is he a racist? No.
No, but he's got his own style, hasn't he? And listen, I thank you very much indeed for your comments. And let's just remember, folks, he's not very far away from being 72 years old. He's kind of done it his own way for the last 50 years. And people saying he should tweet a bit less. It just isn't going to happen. It's going to go on. This presidency will go on exactly the way that it is, giving global news headlines every single day. We are going back to Robert in Ripley. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Robert. Hello, Nigel. Thanks for having me. I wanted to say it's like having the drunk uncle at a wedding and everyone holds their breath. That he doesn't do anything silly. That is what happened in Davos, quite simply. The fact that the man is coherent is something that we're having bank holiday celebrations for. It's just ridiculous. That's the first point. The second point is this. If any politician, including yourself, was caught on tape, categorically it was their voice on tape talking about grabbing a female in her private parts without their permission, I want you to tell me this. Would anyone in the UK have a job, and should they be in any kind of public office afterwards?
OK, Robert.
I really would like you to answer that question.
OK, well, let's deal with both of those, shall we? The first one, about the embarrassing drunk uncle. Everyone crosses their fingers. Let's hope he doesn't get drunk, and can we shove him into the back of a car before the dancing starts? Yeah, understand that. Point is, Robert, he's been going all over the world, starting off with Riyadh, going on to Beijing, going to Warsaw, Paris, Brussels. In fact, he's been almost everywhere apart from the UK. And the point is, Robert, I think, I put this to you, I think he's surprised people the way he's held himself on the world stage.
Because the bar is that low now. That's the bottom line. The bar is that low now.
Well, because of the low grade of many of our Western world leaders, that may well be true. And your second point, look, you know, if people in America had thought that what Trump had said literally was true, he wouldn't have won the election. It was seen as extreme alpha male boasting. And Robert, would people in this country put up with that? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, and a previous caller said this, if any of us at any point in the last 20 years had been recorded saying something in private in our worst moments, it could be portrayed in a very negative light, couldn't it?
Well, then we wouldn't be running for the highest office on earth. The third point...
Well, no, Robert, I tell you what, I'd love to take your third point. We've had 2 goes at this phone call. Time, I'm afraid, has run out. Thank you all for your views on Trump a year on, and whether your views have softened a bit towards him. I think the polling suggests that perhaps they have. But coming up in a moment, I said a few months ago there was a great Brexit betrayal. There was danger we might leave the European Union in name only, and there now phrases being bandied about by others. Jacob Rees-Mogg even warning that the next election could be lost unless she gets this right. So, is the Tory party on its current course doomed? And if you think, no, it's all going to be absolutely fine, then call me on 0345 60 60 973. Or if you think, do you know what? I might not bother to vote for them if they don't deliver Brexit, then text to 84850. And if you've got a message for Mrs May, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, watch me live on Facebook and comment there too.